Hey, thanks so much for listening to the Ridge Community Church podcast. My name is John. I'm one of the pastors on staff at the Ridge, and our vision is to bring the hope of Jesus into every home. So as a piece of that, our goal each week is to bring you something that's hopeful and helpful. So subscribe to this podcast to make sure you don't miss any hopeful and helpful conversations. Hey everyone, and thanks for listening to this episode of the Ridge Community Church podcast. Make sure to follow or subscribe and then rate and review so that more people can catch the conversation. As we continue in our season of Live Big, I got to have an amazing conversation with this week's guest, the CEO of City on a Hill, Art Serna. City on a Hill is one of our local partners, and they do some really amazing work in the city of Milwaukee to end generational poverty and a lot more. Art shares with me some of his story and the story of City on a Hill, the work that they're doing in the lives of their community, and along with some really great thoughts on poverty in general. This is my conversation with Art. Well, hi, Art. Thanks for joining me on the podcast.
Thanks, John. Great to be here.
So would you mind just sharing a little bit about City on a Hill and what you do there?
Absolutely. Well, I'd like to start, John, with this story. So my mom is a cancer survivor. Years ago, she went through experience with breast cancer, and I walked that journey of health, just navigating the health sector, both in Mexico and in the U.S. And there's something about that, it's really deeply personal, and you have to be very vulnerable, and you really get to know a person as they navigate something like that. So that journey of healing, and thankfully, my mom is been well and with us and over a decade of cancer-free, which is amazing. But I like to tell that story because in that journey, she encountered various just people. She would call them her like angels sent on assignment from God that helped her in that journey in the process. And when I think about City on a Hill and why I decided to come on board here, about 2 years ago and then a year ago, take on the role as a lead pastor and CEO, was the story behind City on a Hill. So when you dig into the story, with kind of the set of events that got us to this point dates all the way back to the 1800s, like way back in Germany. And it was this group of believers, women, a lot, that started a movement. It was nurses that were wanting to care for the poor and the sick and the marginalized over in Germany. And it's a place where a school was started, and Florence Nightingale was trained there at one point. But they really released a movement around the world that ended up coming from there to Pittsburgh, where they started a hospital, Protestant hospital. And then from there, eventually the Milwaukee hospital, there was a pastor, his name is William Passavant, that took a trip to Germany, got to see that, and then just got planted a seed in his heart that something was needed here. And he was the one that came along and bought a farmhouse that became the first Protestant hospital in the U.S. on this side of Mississippi. And they started with nurses, start volunteering to try to do things for God. And it reminds me of this. I'd like to talk about John 10:10. That verse talks about Jesus saying, I came so they would have life and have it abundantly, an abundant life. And I think that's really what City on a Hill is all about, partnering with people who are struggling in whatever way in their life and helping them achieve life and experience it abundantly in Christ.
I mean, that's such a powerful picture, right? The going from a place of really lacking to a place of abundance. And thanks for sharing the story with your mother as well. I know that's it's cool to see how God has redeemed not only her through health, but also impacted your story and got you to a place where you wanted to impact others.
Absolutely. You know, I every time I get the chance to talk with my mom still, I mean, they're all back in Texas, so they're not in Milwaukee, but I'm grateful to the Lord for every additional year and day that I get to spend and see her. And I know her mindset and worldview changed dramatically just in that journey. And here at City on a Hill, that's what I find. People, the stories that I heard when I was first coming and visiting, being introduced to the story City on a Hill, was this concept of transformation and that the people we were engaging and have engaged over 20 years since we've been around in the latest iteration of it, coming from an Aurora hospital that was vacated and then came back into the hands of churches. We believe God wants to do something here. And that what became City on a Hill is this concept of revolutionizing the quality of life. And for us, it really means like, what does the gospel look like in reality? And that, I think, when we look at our network of people, what I love, John, even though I'm new to the Milwaukee area, City on a Hill has a network over the last 20 years that's like believers, even non-believers, who are mission aligned to this whole concept of abundant life. That's really all across the nation and some the world that have come and done a poverty simulation, for example, here at City on a Hill, and are now serving in some mission somewhere, and like in the Ukraine or other places. And that is that concept of like being giving of your life to better the life of somebody else. I love that. I wake up every day just thankful to be able to do that here alongside my team.
You mentioned, I mean, you've already shared the story of your mom, right? But I'm curious, have you gotten a chance in your time there where you've seen maybe some stories of people experiencing that abundant life, where they've gone through this shift, and because of the efforts of what you guys are doing, have received some of that abundant life?
Yeah, I mean, there really are so many, and I mean, we've got people that have been on our team for like 17 years and seen that journey over time. And I'm building my own set of stories as I work with people. But one of the things, my background has been really working with young people since I graduated from my undergrad. God just led my heart to do that. And I've done that. Youth and families has been kind of how God has used me through time and really taught me his heart. And so when I came here, I realized that City on a Hill had developed this ability to really walk alongside people over a long period of time. So we have kids that came here when they were 5, which is like the Kyra's story. She came here when she was 5. She's now 17, senior, graduating from high school. And through her experience at City on a Hill, there was a lot of first. She learned about money management and saving, specifically, like starting a savings account and working with us as a youth employee in our program, and just all the interpersonal 21st century skills, all those things she learned while walking alongside a City on a Hill, but her siblings as well. And then her family, her caregivers have been alongside this journey with us. So we do take a holistic approach, like the entire family, not just serving the young person, or child, but coming alongside that entire household and saying, what are the needs? And then committing relationally over a long period of time to say, we're going to walk with you, and we're going to stay committed, and we're going to be present as even as challenges come up. And that's been the Kyra story, just to see her stand in front of her peers and share and lead, and as a youth employee, represent the mission of City on a Hill to guests that are coming in. Now she's looking forward to going to college. She wants to become a dentist. And even as we get ready to launch our first dental clinic in the next 12 months, I just think about the opportunity and the potential for her to come and be part of that effort, and help rebuild her community to something that the aspirational dream that her and her family have.
So you mentioned a couple of times the word relationship, and I'm sure that even though you can give these practical skills and you can help empower with practical skills, like the relationship element kind of probably helps facilitate a ton of that. Why do you feel like that relational element is so important?
Yeah, I had experiences in many different contexts, both working with school districts and institutions, in mostly communities of color, and mostly communities that have a high poverty rate, urban neighborhoods. And what is true is that helping, like, I've heard it said that the relationships move at the speed of trust, and social change moves at the speed of relationships. And so even if we have the best of programs, right, or the best of staff and the strategic plan, what is true and the type of work that we're doing, poverty and every context of that, high trauma, all those things that go alongside of that, that if you don't have that relational trust, like nothing works and nothing really matters. Because a lot of the work that you're inviting people into is a major drastic behavioral change and mindset change, right? And so that only happens at the level of, you have to peel the onion. And most of the times, I think about John, like COVID. So I moved to Milwaukee during 2020. So I've only known
rough time to move in
Milwaukee, from that point forward. And as we started engaging even our youth center and our health clinic, and so we have various ways of like aspects of ministry, how we help people achieve abundant life. But as we engage both children, youth, caregivers, or parents, grandparents, et cetera, like, how are you doing? There was always a pause, like truly, like, how are you doing? That's an invitation to vulnerability, right? And it's an invitation for people to take a deeper dive. And I've seen that be very true for us in terms of trust leads to the next step. And then you lean on that to take the next step until people truly build each block of what they need for their life to feel whole and to feel like complete and what they're seeking out of life.
I'm sure you could answer this in 1,000 different ways, but are there maybe one or two ways that you think City on a Hill does it, like, very purposefully to build that trust and build that relationship?
Yeah. So for one, I think we talk to people about this concept of mutual transformation. I think the example of Jesus of, given Emmanuel, he came in the flesh, right? And he came and he was with those he sought, those who had the pain, who he spent time with. It just the model of Christ and how being rich, he became poor so that he could connect and he could be that concept of being present. I think it's a way that I've seen others, Diane and others, model this work. I mean, she, as our founder, Diane, in years, she lived in this neighborhood. It's just so powerful to build empathy. So we spent, when we first moved here, the first set of months here in 2020, we lived here at City on a Hill, and just having conversations with people around, like, people asking us in the apartments right next door that were used to be part of City on a Hill, like, why would you come here, right? And where do you live? Oh, you live right here. Like, why would you do that? And just created so many opportunities to, I guess where I'm going at is Jesus basically puts everyone on the same level, right? Like, all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. Like, that's pretty universal. Like, it's everyone, right? It doesn't matter. You and he just kind of brings that, and at the same time, to all who believe, right? He gives to everyone. So that the ability for us to show up like that in whatever conversation, like, one of the things that and this happens sometimes in smaller organizations, I would say that this is a God-sized vision with, like, a very small team. So I sink my teeth into the concepts of the early church and, like, the small group of Jesus, that a very intimate group that turned the world upside down, because it gives me hope and possibility. But in that, driving the van, like, taking that role of a pastor at times to say, I'm going to go pick up someone and building community at that level, that we're all in this together, right? We're all community. We try to create spaces where, when we have events, community, our dinner church, that those who are coming to serve are also coming to learn and be transformed, and serving alongside residents, like our young people, our youth employees, so that people feel like we're all in this together. So that's some of the ways that I've seen those before me here at City Hill, and seen it since 2020, of how we built some of that trust over time.
Yeah. I mean, you talk about the power of just being present, and I really appreciate the phrase mutual transformation, where it's not this thought process of we are coming to save, but we're with each other and helping each other. And yeah, there's some resources and stuff that we can provide you with, but with a full knowledge that we're present and we're with you. Kind of the picture of, I go down into the pit with you versus trying to just reach down and grab you. That to me, that carries just a cool power and just illustrates the value of that relationship and how both people, when both people care, or both groups or both sides, whatever,
Sure.
there's a lot of value in that.
Yeah, for us as a family, we had this moment in 2020. I'm sure many individuals face something similar, but for Karen and I, we're sitting and watching the world around us and looking at numbers and stats of different cities being impacted, and at the same time, we had our two kids, and we were really asking if we read the scriptures and said, like, how do we show them what, like, how the church shows up in 21st century Christianity in a way that makes the world better. And that was, and to be honest, at least for us, we were living a comfortable life, and trying to do our best to, fulfill or be obedient to whatever the message of Christ meant to us. But if we were honest, we also felt that we were comfortable and a bit complacent in terms of like the Great Commission, what it meant for us specifically as a family. And we kind of felt if we would have stayed in the same place, right, like we would have lost something in terms of being able to pass something down to John and Tanya. And so for us felt like God said, you need to take on this new adventure, be with me in this adventure. And so that part of that reason, and when I came here, I realized that many people had that similar experience of like in their adventure with Jesus, as they sought to fully realize what it meant to like carry their cross, right, and to live their faith in some way, whether it's a volunteer or a donor or a partner or a resident, a guest in here, all of that same story brought people together, and we could connect immediately of like, I have a similar story to that. Like the reason I'm here, I multiple of people on our team here at City on a Hill. One of the things that we feel pretty strongly about, like, so we have, and I've never mentioned this, John, but at City on a Hill, how we do the work, from a kind of theory of change, it takes different forms, but one of them is just meeting the basic needs of people, right? The hierarchy of needs. If we ever feel like we're going to go deeper, we just have to meet the basic needs. So we do that through a series of just like emergency food and different things like that, and then health, making sure your health is taken care of. And then we also know that some of the issues we deal with, the root causes of long-term poverty, are complex and long-term, and we need to start early working with people on the factors that actually transform that reality and break generational poverty. So we do that through our youth center, all sorts of various offerings to mentor and equip young people to do that, and then come alongside their family to figure out does the care head of the household need to be whole, whether it's financially or otherwise. And then last of all, we believe that God instituted the most transformative, catalytic institution of change in the earth through the resurrection, and in the church. And so we believe that the church really comes into understanding her full identity, that this whole concept of abundant life for everyone there's a pathway to achieve that. And so the kind of one of the third things, not everyone knows this about us, but we do have a training and equipping a center department where we feel it's our role is to equip the broader public on solutions to poverty and well-being. And that means helping people understand what are the realities of urban poverty, and why are they that way, and what are solutions? How can people get into action? And we don't like define for people you should do X, Y, or Z, but we hope that as we invite them into an immersive experience, that God and His Spirit will speak to them to say, perhaps for you it's in education, right? Or perhaps for you it's in healthcare, like you need to go be a nurse, or you need to run for elected office, whatever it is, that the Spirit of God will speak to people, and that many different solutions will start. And part of that we do with like mission teams that come on site to begin that journey of transformation. All that to say, I think all of the way to do that is a beautiful picture of like the church getting engaged on these issues, and why we love, the work of the Ridge and what you all do with Live Big, because you give people an opportunity to step up into generosity and see change in a very practical way in the city. Maybe it's not like their immediate neighborhood, but they get to be part of the story that God is building for us, the city of Milwaukee.
So you mentioned like the poverty and the poverty cycles. Could you share just a little bit about like, hey, maybe a base level, what is a poverty cycle? Why is it hard to get out of? And I realize this could be like you could probably give like a 4-hour seminar on that. But maybe some just like basics for somebody like kind of conceptualize. And we've been talking a lot about like understanding and gaining perspective. And I think some perspective on poverty and poverty cycles is really valuable.
Sure. Well, you're right. It could take, it's a, I'm sure an academic course at some university somewhere, right. Or a master class. But I'm so thankful. One of the things I'm thankful to God for coming here, like having such a great teacher and mentor in Diane here as who was the founding CEO of City on a Hill for many years, ran it for 20 years. But she gained so much insight. And one of the things and projects I got to work with her on last year was really looking back 20 years at the work of City on a Hill and some of the work. We have this, one of our workshops that we've used is the racial residue. Now it's been branded as the R3 workshop of what can we know and learn about why things are the way they are in terms of specifically generational poverty. And by that, we mean like, this is perpetual. It's being passed down from one generation to the next and to the next to the next. That's specific to not just like material poverty or temporary poverty, but generational. It's a cycle, and it gets perpetuated from one generation to the other. So in that, one of the things we know, and why I even talk about this, is we like to tell teams as they come on site to City on a Hill, like, hey, why should this be near to your heart? Why should you even ask the question, right? And so we like to tell them like, well, God gives us one, it's very dear to God's heart. If you just like search the scriptures, there's a particular Bible called the Poverty and Justice Bible. And it's very helpful to reference 1,200 various references across the scripture and God's heart for the poor, and 800 verses about justice and God's anger at injustice. So we know that this is like at the top of God's list of like how he sees the world, and he is set by the reality. So right now in the zip code that we sit in right now, pre-COVID, it's not the zip code with the most children, young people in Milwaukee, but I think it's a good size to be able to say, well, what could the church do here, right? And so it's 72% of kids under the age of 18 were living in poverty before COVID. At this side of COVID, the latest numbers from the American Community Survey said that had gone up to 82. Wow. So we know that there's a need to understand, like, what's the scale of this issue, right? We're like potentially 7 blocks from downtown. So it's not very far, right? For like the center of government in one of the significant metro cities in the country. Yeah. And being so close to anchor institutions like Harley and Aurora and others, right? At this part of Milwaukee, to see some of those statistics is just good for people to grapple with that reality and the starkness of it, And at the same time, we like to say there's now, without getting too in the weeds, John, but like there's big data now that we can look at data, not just like at the city level or the municipal level, but down to the neighborhood level to see why are things the way they are, how do different neighborhoods actually compare. And now data coming out of various sites like Harvard and others looking at this to say there's actually now cities that are creating the realities, the indicators around them, where entire neighborhoods could really be transformed for young people. And that's what gives us hope and about the role that we can play in 2 fronts. One is, how do we bring and engage everyone listening to this podcast and other partners, like our network of churches and supporters from across the world? How do we bring some of that network and social capital into the neighborhoods we're supporting over the next 10 years? To create those conditions more and more so that the early kid has more of those conditions in place, it can be shown out through data, the more likely they will be experiencing the abundant life by the time they're 30, 35. And so that's what we're like consumed with that mission now as we start looking into the future, because we feel that God is saying, like, this is the commission I think he's giving City on a Hill for the foreseeable future. And that's important. One, God cares deeply about this issue. The data is showing us how, like, down to the level of neighborhood, like your neighbor, how deep is this issue and vast. And then thirdly, we can actually, data is showing us too that there's something we can do about it, like very practical, beyond just like doing a one-time thing. Can be very transformative things to see entire neighborhoods experience abundant life. And that makes me excited.
You mentioned like bringing in like social networking and capital into these neighborhoods. What does that look like? Is that like City on a Hill does like recurring youth events or something like that? Is it building those relationships? Is that people coming in and volunteering and trying to establish a business? What does that look like?
Sure. So one of the things that I think for us, that's been a gift of God and an asset, has been this, like Milwaukee, with like at one point it was like 7 buildings, 4 buildings specifically came to us. So we feel like a responsibility to put that to use towards the very thing you just said, right? How do we use this to do that? And so we do it multiple ways. One, we make it possible for churches, church groups, college groups to come on site at City on a Hill and spend a whole week, spend a weekend, spend a day, not just serve, but to learn and go through an education around things that we've been talking about, pull up the stats and pull up the scriptures and show people what it means. And as we do that, we find that relationships are built, and oftentimes there's similarities. People find like, oh, I care about that as well, or I care about photography as well, or I got a business that's related to, they may connect with a young person or somebody, and relationships and social capital is shared that way. The other way is, we've got space that we lease out to mission-aligned entities that are coming alongside of us and say, again, I would say the building needs a lot of tender love and care. So I'm not saying, so in that people come with, because they have a heart and a mission to serve, but as they partner with us, we can begin to share in like dreaming together about the future of the neighborhood and say, what would God desire to be present in this place? And whether that's going after institutional investors or donors to say, let's launch like something that a dance studio or something, right? For the community that doesn't just benefit City on a Hill, but it's beginning to share some of that. And the last thing I would say, something we're really focusing on, like in the story, like of the young person I talked earlier, who was 5 when they came, and now they're coming of age, going to college or graduating from college. And we feel God saying, like, we need to launch an alumni program. And that's part of what y'all helped us with as a church to begin to think about that. But the alumni program begins to say, part of generational wealth is an avenue to break generational poverty so that families can start actually building generational wealth, buying property, owning homes, retaining that equity, and then helping to build a community. So we've been thinking a lot about, when you hear about stories of like the Facebook founders and others, a lot of research talks about like the concept of serendipity. Like they just got lucky, right? A lot of people, they just got lucky. They knew somebody, and as they were doing it, they had an idea, but they got lucky. They knew someone that knew someone, and it made it their idea come to fruition, or they were able to pitch somewhere that gave them resources that they wouldn't otherwise have. And so our big question to us is, what would it mean for us to bring some of that, more of that serendipity, more opportunities for our young people and their families to be alongside other people, right, who might own their own companies or have ideas or done stuff in the world, for example, an example of your wife, who's in the medical profession, right, who are in the health sector. for somebody on our youth that might have an aspiration to do that. That is so important as people start thinking about college and references and contacts and interviews and internships. So that's some of the way we feel we can start bringing some of those, the social capital of our broader network in very practical terms, by relationship, and then so creating events and opportunities. We'll be doing 4 youth entrepreneurship workshops or boot camps next year throughout the city of Milwaukee. And part of what we're orienting is how do we bring people who really know like the mindset of an entrepreneur, like what does it actually take to start a venture, not just that it's like that's potential to like be multi-market, not just Milwaukee, that actually draws resources into the city. And so we that's not necessarily our lane, although that is my passion given what my education academically has been. So we're connecting with entrepreneurs who say, would you be a mentor? And would you help us potentially as we put seed funding into a series of prototype concepts so that those who do this all the time in the city could potentially have a very compelling idea pitched to them, right? That's already sound because we've enabled some of that social capital to come into preparing our young people to do that.
That's such like an eye-opening concept for me because I think that it's really easy to think through, okay, who do I have friendships with? What connections do I have, resources, whatever. And maybe take some of that for granted that I've just been in an environment where I've had those connections and those relationships. And especially for areas with so much generational poverty, like those connections and those resources and those people they know aren't necessarily just available. And so to be able to create spaces and opportunities to bridge those gaps, right? That's creates an avenue for people to really be resourced in a whole different way that probably is really easy to overlook. I'm curious, you kind of mentioned some of the stuff that happened with Live Big. Would you share just a little bit about the impact that kind of Live Big has had on City on a Hill?
Sure. I mean, I still remember it vividly. It was one of my first external kind of events here in Milwaukee as kind of coming into City on a Hill. But Kelly surprised us with a big check for a van that we were really had a heart and desire, and as we spend time with people, I had this experience early on, which I was very grateful for, but I went to the south side of Milwaukee, primarily Hispanic, and this incredible organization in St. Augustine Prep, and incredible team, incredible people. And they built a multi-million-dollar facility, a schooling, and it was, no kidding you, like the fields and the sports fields were amazing, like incredible. It just communicates love and value and the love of God for that community. And at the same time, I came back to City on a Hill and recognized, wow, like that would be so transformative. There's an aspect of walking with people that it communicates dignity and care to say, like, you actually have a place. So for us, the van that we had didn't communicate that to our young people. And I remember when we first acquired it, it was almost entirely new van, John. Like it was very passenger van, like 15 or so seats, and with our branding on it. And when we came and brought some of the young people to come see it, like just listening to them talk about like, oh, it's so beautiful. Like it's so beautiful, it's so nice, and like AC, all the different stuff, like the video thing when you back up, all of that, and they have a lot of window space, right? So you can actually, as you ride through Milwaukee, get the view. And for some young people that may had not been for like an intervention, not even ever get to go to the lake. Even that ability of like expanding the kind of world that's what you all help to do. And then the other thing for me, as I lean into more kind of the pastoral side of things, for our dinner church community, which tends to be usually people that come to our health clinic, older, and live all across the city, for me to be able to say, what does family look like? And what you all enable us to do is really respond to people to say, hey, it'd be even better. I'd feel more loved if somebody could pick me up ahead of it, like run the route and take me home in the evening afterwards. And I've had the distinct pleasure to do that, like go and pick people up during the dinner church. And I'm not the only one who does that, but I've had the opportunity to do that. And it's enabled like the type of conversations that we have. There's one of our guests, and he is close to homeless and lives in a place that he might be embarrassed to like let people know where he goes, but because I was doing that, he enabled me to actually know where he was living. Right. And we begin to see him come alive, like actually share aspects of his life that no one had ever seen. Right. And his personality came out. And there was this one drink that somebody donated to him. And as we write, he's like, hey, do you like this type of like soft drink? And to say that the next time I picked him up, he had one for me.
Wow.
He thought about that for me. And that is what your band, more than anything, that deeper relationships and our ability to like respond to people's needs is what you all made possible. So
you mentioned
very
like the hierarchy of needs and how not even just taking care of them on like a base level, which I mean, tremendously valuable, right? But also like the way in which you do it that conveys you matter. I'm excited about being in this space, even if it's a van, right? Communicate something and provides the space and the atmosphere for that relationship. That's really cool. Okay. So then fun side of this, what are you guys hoping to be able to do this year through Live Big? Yeah.
So one of the things I'm so excited about is as I talk to your young people, like part of our theory of change, and we actually think like what God is calling us is like, do you have faith? Like at one point in our journey, we had to have faith, one, that God could give us a building, and God's shown up in major ways to do that. I think now God is challenging us to say, do you have faith that I can change a city? Like this, the overall narrative of a city, given like being on the ground. And we got to say, yeah, Lord, like we do believe that you can do that. And as we think about that, we think a part of the theory of change in making change, not just transactional, but transformative and long lasting. Just when we think about the early church and how discipleship movements came, it was relational. It was like this idea of the good news of God entering people's hearts. But there were Timothys that were raised in that movement, right? And those Timothys really helped add fuel to that movement. So we feel like growing those promising young leaders locally, which we've done over the last 20 years. Now we have a network of Timothys now that are walking alongside of us, shaping the institutions in the city that influence them. One of them is like media, right? The media. And then developing the networks around them and us to focus on local change over a long period of time, and then mobilizing collective action and leadership from churches and others who believe. So one way to do that, a lot of our young people, the Gen Zs and Gen Alpha that is coming after them, they may not be willing to wait for an institution to change itself enough, whether it be the church or something else, to achieve the need that they see around them, right? Like they're deeply care, like, well, what can I do now? And so we're seeing like the power of digital media to give people a voice and a platform to share their story directly. And even like, we don't want you to tell our story. Like we like ourselves. So the concept of a podcast, not just show or channel, but a vehicle for our families and heads of households, our young people, and our those that are walking the patients in our medical clinic to share the importance of what they're learning in their journey. And so we're excited to be able to create the first multimedia studio for City on a Hill to empower people really with the ability to have their story reach a global audience and connect with people. As if I can go back to the beginning of my story, John, like our story goes all the way back to Germany. It was a movement for good that circled the entire globe at that time back in the 1800s. And we feel the need to give people the avenue to be part of that larger global story of change. And so I'm hopeful that your listeners can help us achieve that, because that's really, once it's out there in the world, like there's no way to be able to take it back. It puts out hope and possibility, and for what the future of Milwaukee and then other communities could be.
Yeah. And stories are just so powerful, and the ability to tell stories, the ability to share those resources and really too kind of learn the media side of stuff, right? Where they're learning these skills that are, then they can train somebody else with that, that you breaking those cycles and sharing those stories in a really impactful way. Well, Art, thank you so much for sharing with me. And I know that this has been really just an awesome opportunity. I love this conversation. And honestly, I could probably talk to you for a lot longer. Just because I'm really enjoying it.
I tell you, we might just pull on you later. You're able to launch that multimedia studio, right? As to help coach people on how you do the work that you do. But I appreciate, John, the time and the opportunity to get to know you, and look forward to future opportunities to converse.
Yeah. Thanks, Art.
You bet.
Well, that was my conversation with Art, and I really enjoyed hearing his perspective and his heart to really go where God has called him. I was really encouraged by the work that City on a Hill is doing to bring resources and opportunities that break really challenging poverty cycles. If you want to learn more about City on a Hill or get involved, you can find their website in the show notes. And if you want to give to live big or find out more about what that is all about, you can find that link in the show notes as well. Well, thanks for listening to this episode, and make sure to follow or subscribe so that you don't miss a single hopeful and helpful conversation.